St. Augustine Commentary on the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 12 to 21 following. Well, who sell oxen? They who have dispensed to us the Holy Scriptures are understood to mean the oxen. The apostles were oxen, the prophets were oxen. When the apostle says, "You shall not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treads out the corn," does God take care for oxen? Or says he it for our sakes? For our sakes he says it, that the whole plows should plow in hope, and that he that threshes in hope of partaking. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 9 and 10. Those oxen then have left to us the narration of the Scriptures. For it was not of their own that they dispensed, because they sought the glory of the Lord. Now what have you heard in that psalm? And let them say continually, "The Lord be magnified, they that wish the peace of his servant." Psalm 35, verse 27. God's servant, God's people, God's church. Let them who wish the peace of that church magnify the Lord, not the servant, and let them say continually, "The Lord be magnified." Who, let's say? Them who wish the peace of his servant. The voice of that people, of that servant, is clearly that voice which you have heard in Lamentations in the Psalm, and were moved at hearing, because you are of that people. What was sung by one, re-echoed from the hearts of all? Happy they who recognized themselves in those voices as in a mirror. Who then are they that wish the peace of his servant, the peace of his people, the peace of the one whom he calls his Holy One, and whom he wishes to be delivered from the lion? Deliver mine only one from the power of the dog. Psalm 22, verse 20. They who say always, "The Lord be magnified." Those oxen then magnified the Lord, not themselves. See this ox magnifying his Lord, because the ox knows his owner. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3. Observe that ox in fear, lest men desert the ox's owner and rely on the ox. How he dreads them that are willing to put their confidence in him. Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 13. Of what I gave, I was not the giver. Freely you have received, the dove came down from heaven. I have planted, says he, Apollo watered, but God gave the increase. Neither he that plants is anything, neither he that waters, but God that gives the increase. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6 and 7. And let them say always, "The Lord be magnified, they that wish the peace of his servant." These men, however, deceive the people by the very Scriptures, that they may receive honors and praises at their hand, and that men may not turn to the truth. But in that they deceive, by the very Scriptures, the people of whom they seek honors, they do in fact sell oxen. They sell sheep too, that is, the common people themselves. And to whom do they sell them? But to the devil? For if the church be Christ's sole and only one, who is it that carries off whatever is cut away from it? But that lion that roars and goes about, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Woe to them that are cut off from the church. As for her, she will remain entire, for the Lord knows them that are his. To Timothy chapter 2 verse 19. These, however, so far as they can sell oxen and sheep, they sell doves too. Let them guard against the scourge of their own sins. But when they suffer some such things for these their iniquities, let them acknowledge that the Lord has made a scourge of small cords, and is admonishing them to change themselves and be no longer traffickers. For if they will not change, they shall at the end hear it said, Bind you these men's hands and feet, and cast them forth into outer darkness. Then the disciples remembered that it was written, The zeal of your house has eaten me up. Because by this zeal of God's house, the Lord cast these men out of the temple. Brethren, let every Christian among the members of Christ be eaten up with the zeal of God's house. Who is eaten up with zeal of God's house? He who exerts himself to have all that he may happen to see wrong there corrected, desires it to be mended, does not rest idle, who, if he can't mend it, endures it, laments it. The grain is not shaken out on the threshing floor, that it may enter the barn, when the chaff shall have been separated. If you are a grain, be not shaken out from the floor, before the putting into the granary, lest you be picked up by the birds, before you be gathered up into the granary. For the birds of heaven, the powers of the air, are waiting to snatch up something off the threshing floor, and they can snatch up only what has been shaken out of it. Therefore, let the zeal of God's house eat you up. Let the zeal of God's house eat up every Christian, zeal of that house of God, of which he is a member. For your own house is not more important than that wherein you have everlasting rest. You go into your own house for temporal rest, you enter God's house for everlasting rest. If then you busy yourself to see that nothing wrong be done in your own house, is it fit that you suffer so far as you can help if you should chance to see aught wrong in the house of God, where salvation is set before you and rest without end? For example, see you a brother rushing to the theater? Stop him, warn him, make him sorry, if the zeal of God's house does eat you up. See you others running and desiring to get drunk, and that too in holy places, which is not decent to be done in any place? Stop those whom you can, restrain whom you can, frighten whom you can, allure gently whom you can. Do not, however, rest silent. Is it a friend? Let him be admonished gently. Is it a wife? Let her be bridled with the utmost rigor. Is it a maidservant? Let her be curbed even with blows. Do whatever you can for the part you bear, and so you fulfill. The zeal of your house has eaten me up. But if you will be cold, languid, having regard only to yourself, and as if yourself were enough to you, and saying in your heart, What have I to do with looking after other men's sins? Enough for me is the care of my own soul. This let me keep, This let me keep undefiled for God. Come, does there not recur to your mind the case of that servant who hid his talent and would not lay it out? Was he accused because he lost it, and not because he kept it without profit? Matthew chapter 25, verse 25 to 30. So hear you then, my brethren, that you may not rest idle. I am about to give you counsel. May who is within give it. For though it be through me, it is he that giveth. You know what to do, each of one of you, in his own house, with his friend, his tenant, his client, with greater, with less, as God grants an entrance, as he opens the door for his word. Do not cease to win for Christ, because you were won by Christ.